welcome to this episode of Chain Conversations. My name is Laura McQueen and I'm the MD here at Leaders. This season is part of a programme called the Leaders Meet Diversity series, which we've been running in partnership with Facebook for a couple of years now. Chain Conversation brings together leaders from a variety of backgrounds across professional sport to share their personal stories, to reflect on their own career journeys, pinpointing some peaks and troughs, some helps and hindrances along the way to share with you. The premise is simple, really. Person A picks person B to interview, person B picks person C to interview, and so on and so on. So over the course of the coming months, you'll really get exposed to quite a lot of independent personal journeys throughout the sports industry. The aim is to inspire you, to energise you, and to showcase why diverse thinking and diverse opportunity makes for a better business across sport and beyond. I really hope you enjoy it and speak to you soon.
So I'm delighted today to be recording the latest episode of the Leaders Chain Conversation. I'm joined by Maggie Murphy, who I'm delighted also to say is the new Chief Executive Officer of Lewes FC. Maggie, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you.
Yeah, same here. Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. So we'll get into it. So I wanted to ask you first of all, Maggie, tell me about your career journey and how you've moved through such a variety of roles, really, and what's been your favourite?
Yeah, okay, so it's a little bit patchy. Some people won't really understand my background. So as you mentioned, I'm the brand new CEO, but I've been at Lewes for 2 years as the general manager, covering the women's side of the club. But before that, I hadn't had a single official role in football, not working in football. My background for the last 10, 15 years has been in international human rights and anti-corruption.
Wow.
So for about, for a long time, I was working in tackling money laundering and promoting financial transparency and representing a big organization, Transparency International, big anti-corruption organization. So I was going to the UN, the G20, the OECD, and trying to push governments and businesses to have better governance in place and to be more transparent and adopt better laws. And the same on human rights side of things. I spent quite a long time overseas in different parts of the world. And so I think that I have a really strong kind of social justice core to my work. So the football club comes in mainly because I've always loved football since I was a kid. I grew up playing, I've played all my life. For me, it was always something on the side. It was never a profession. I never wanted to work in football, funnily enough. But what drew me in was the older I got and when I stopped playing competitively, and I still had this career on the side in anti-corruption and human rights, the more I realized how connected football is to social impact and culture. And for all the goals I was trying to achieve, whether that was on gender equality or inclusion, we're going to get there quicker if we use football to get there. And I was so passionate about football and I can see its power and impact, and I could see how women are kind of often locked out or they don't enjoy the benefits of football. And Lewes FC is like just the most incredible, progressive football club that we'll obviously get into. So when the opportunity arose to come in and be part of what the club here is creating, it was kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, that's in some ways, that's the ideal job. I've absolutely loved it. I've loved every job that I've had, but this is, there's something special here.
Yeah, they're fascinating. I could talk to you all day about that, actually, just your background. But I agree. I'm really passionate about the fact that football is such a fantastic vehicle for driving social impact. And I think you've answered what brought you into football, but maybe just expand a little bit on your kind of background and your playing career and why you love football.
Yeah, so I grew up on the Isle of Wight, and on the Isle of Wight, there weren't many opportunities for girls to play. There were no clubs for girls to play. Whenever I could, I was in the garden, or once a year, maybe our school would put in a football team into a girls' tournament, and I absolutely loved it. And I really wanted to carry on playing. I ended up playing for the adult women's. There was one single team on the Isle of Wight, and I ended up playing for them when I was 13. I played illegally under other people's names just to allow me to play because I wasn't old enough technically. I'm sorry to the FA, don't worry, you did find me multiple times. So I was always just wanting to play. I went to university, captained my
rebel. You're a rebel, aren't you? I can sense it, Maggie.
My problem is that if I don't think a rule is fair, I'm going to try and challenge it. That's the problem. So I went to university, captained university, but in between, I was, like I mentioned, I lived in Rwanda for a year. I played for a football team there. Wow. I was in Tanzania. I won the national cup in Tanzania playing for a team there. So I was also really attuned to the disparities and opportunities and some of the governance issues, and also the commitment and dedication, because I think a lot of the time people think that women's football doesn't really exist, and it always exists. Every time I've lived in Senegal or I was in the Caribbean for a short time, I've always found a women's team really easily. When you're in the team, then it can be quite difficult to take part in football because there's lots of structures that are put against you. So I was playing as much as I could, but always for fun. So that's the kind of the football angle. So I'd be kind of I lived in Berlin for a while, so I would just be working, flying around the world, as I said, and those things, but coming back, getting my boots out, going and playing on the Sunday, coming back. For me, football was, also living around the world in all these places. My Kiswahili wasn't great, but you didn't really need it when you were on the football pitch. You could still communicate, and you were able to enter into a friendship and a community so much quicker because of football. I didn't need to be fluent in the language because you already had friends and teammates, and allowances would be made, but you were already part of a group. So I think that was, it's just one of the beauties of football, where it is that global game. Yeah, no,
and that's fantastic. I'm going to go off script in a little while. Actually, I want to come back to that if I may, Maggie, because some fascinating stuff I'd love to talk to you about. But tell us about your plans for Lewes over the next 12 months, and obviously in your new capacity, I'm sure you've got some really ambitious ideas and thoughts you want to implement. What's your thoughts for the next 12 months?
Yeah, we're at such an exciting time for the club. The club went into fan ownership, so it's 100% fan owned. Anyone can become an owner. Went into fan ownership in about 11 years ago. In 2017, it took the decision to split its revenue equally between the men's side and the women's side. So a lot of people understand that as pay parity. There is equal playing budgets, only club in the world to do it. And but also in the last couple of years, especially with the women's team playing in the Championship and playing the likes of Liverpool and Crystal Palace and Leicester City, here at the Dripping Pan in Sussex, we've had to professionalize really quickly. So we've in that 10 years, we've kind of gone from being a grassroots club to being to pushing towards being fully professional, or as professional as we can be. We still have plenty of constraints on us. So moving forward, our women's team are going to be shifting to a more full-time model, so training during the day instead of in the evenings, and that's designed to provide the best environment we possibly can for them. We've just brought in a brand new manager onto the men's side who is just bringing in some fantastic players. So we're really hoping that next season we'll have a cracking season on both sides. For me personally, there's a few things that I think are really important. One is that continued professionalization, because the clubs like ours, we rely on volunteers a lot. We have hundreds of people that donate hundreds of hours to the club, whether that's on the turnstile or painting the steps in the off season, whatever it might be. And as part of that, we need to improve the infrastructure, improve the offer to fans, get more fans back in, because obviously we have been hit by COVID as well. But the piece that I'm really excited about is on culture. I think we've got an incredible culture across this club, but I really want to figure out to what extent that culture infiltrates every part of the club, not just the top two teams, not just the first teams, but also the pathway teams, also with staff, with coaches, with volunteers. How do we create that culture so that that's our, that's going to be the thing that wins it for us? We're not going to have the same budget as Liverpool, but we can have that special something, which is really hard to define, but that will help us win on the day. So that cultural piece, I think, is really important for us. And we're also moving towards setting up an academy as well. And when I say academy, at Lewes, we try and do everything differently. Academies in many places are really rotten. They chew up kids, they spit them out when they're no longer potentially profitable. And so we're trying to build what we believe will be a world-class academy system that really places emphasis on the player as a person first, and will provide leadership skills, and we'll have the boys and girls together as part of that. So it's not this kind of weird, slightly separated system where the boys are over there, the girls are over there. We really want to enshrine that ethos of our club as being, #1 club, but trying to build that into our youth structures as well, so that they see the benefits of being in a club that supports both men and the women equally.
Brilliant.
Sorry, that was a long spiel.
No, it's really fascinating actually. And would you say, I want to put this in the right way, would you say, given the level that you guys play at when it comes to the women's game, you're almost at the kind of, would it be fair to say you're at the forefront of driving the professionalism for the club actually? And for you're a great example actually. Probably men's team follow your example when it comes to professionalism and standards. Yeah,
it's funny, because yes, we've had to make improvements to our grounds, whether that's media gantries or floodlight lux levels. We've had to make a huge number of improvements. The size of the dugout, things like that, which have come from the women's side, because it's the women's side that has those requirements because of broadcast deals, for example. So definitely on the men's side, they've seen the benefit of that. But also one of the crucial things is that we've seen an uptick in sponsorship recently, because brands and companies that like what we're doing, they back the equality side of the club, and they also back the community, like that interesting thing about being an elite club and still so community connected. And so that uptick in sponsorship has kind of been driven by the women's side, but again is split equally. Whereas a couple of years ago, I think when the decision was taken to split revenue, there was a few people on the men's side that were like, whoa, hang on a sec, that's an unfair share. The women are getting an unfair share. And now the same people are kind of saying, hey, where's our fair share? So there's a cultural thing in there as well, which absolutely is exciting
and fascinating. As I guess as chief exec, from a business case perspective, the women's, your women's team is the brand now, isn't it? Is the forefront, is the driver of the club really, and key to future success, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it is. I think that you only have our focus on the women's side because of how principled the club is. Like that was only possible because the football club, which was largely dominated by the men's side, was willing to go there because of its community values and its sense of purpose. The directors always talk about a football club being a community asset. Therefore, anything we do is there to serve our community. And community for us is, we've got multiple communities that might be here physically in Lewes, but we've got lots of communities around the world that are interested in football being better. So one example is that we take a really strong anti-gambling stance. We refuse to have any money from gambling companies. We had a gambling company that came in a few years ago to offer us the biggest amount of sponsorship yet to date, and we declined immediately, and instead went to a charity that supports people who have lost loved ones to gambling related suicide.
Wow.
And we put their logo on our shirts instead, and then we fundraised for them. So rather than take the money, we didn't just decline it, we then kind of took this extra step. And those are the kinds of things that we do a lot. As part of Kick It Out, we'll frequently get offered campaign t-shirts for a game or for a week or for a month, and we will never wear those t-shirts unless we do something else, or unless we are doing something else. It's allowed us to be a lot more thoughtful because we won't do that, because we're like, okay, well, Amnesty International's Welcomes Week, actually we don't do that much. We haven't actually we haven't sat down and really considered what we can do to support and welcome refugees. And that was fantastic, because we wore the t-shirt, but we now have a program in place where we welcome refugees to be stewards at our games. We've involved them in activities, and we've basically just drawn them. That was provided the door for us to really think about it properly and draw people into the community that otherwise we could always have said, oh, of course we're welcome and we're open. But there's one thing saying that you're welcome and open, and there's another going, no, really, come on in. Are you ready? Come on in. We'll make it easy for you. So I think coming back to the question, yes, the women's side is definitely more visible. There's a lot more, a lot more interest in some areas on that, but it was only possible because of how committed to principles and values the club is.
That's brilliant. Again, I'd love to have a longer conversation with you. It sounds like you're doing some fantastic stuff down there. I'd love to come and spend some time as well and see a game at some point. So tell me about what you're passionate about. What I think some of that has come out in our conversation already, but what are the things that really drive you, Maggie?
Yeah, well, I mean, before I was working in football, I would have said football. That was an easier answer then. I've got a strong sense of like that fairness and purpose. That is the thing that drives me most. I think that if I see things, I remember, I don't know why it came about, but I think that even as a kid, I was the one that was writing the letter to the school teacher if I thought that there was something that wasn't fair, whether that was between boys and girls or whether that was an age cap on something. I feel like I was the one picking up the pen and saying, on behalf of all the students, we would like to raise a concern about this. So I think that kind of that fairness is something that it kind of is enshrined into the things that I think about.
Brilliant. Okay, and it's been a kind of fascinating, depending on which way you look at it, I guess, but it's been fascinating 18 months with COVID. The world seems to have changed dramatically. What's been your experience? What have you learned about yourself through the last 18 months, Maggie?
It's been tough when I think about the last year working in a football club, being responsible for a lot of players that were under a lot more stress than I was in a way. We had to adhere to really high COVID protocols. On the men's side, the men's league stopped in about October. On the women's side, we continued, but in really tough circumstances. To the point that some of our players, to adhere to the protocol, some of our players weren't able to see their boyfriends or partners. They weren't able to go home and see family. And we were really strict about it because we really wanted to be able to finish the league. And so I think actually a lot of my learnings is probably about them and how resilient they were and how committed they were, the dedication that they showed. And I think it was really, really tough. I think we hold people to really high standards. Like at the club, because we're so passionate about everything we're trying to achieve. And I think that probably towards the end of the season, there was a little bit of a breaking of that kind of, we managed to finish the season. And there was like a bit of an outpouring of just relief, but also that pent up stress and emotion. So I'm not sure whether it's something that I learned, but I think that, we ask people to be quite resilient, and you almost force it on people to be resilient, but there needs to be that space for people to let out their stress and frustration and emotion. I don't know whether we would have done anything differently, but I'm really proud of what we did throughout that time to support some of those players as well. We adopted a mental health strategy really early on, and we provided quite a lot of support to the players and to the staff throughout that. We could have always done better. I think we're learning about mental health strength, I guess, throughout the whole process.
Brilliant. I think that's one of the big learnings for lots of us probably through the last 18 months, the importance of mental health and mental well-being. And slightly off in a different track, who's the most inspirational person that you've met?
So I'm really bad that when it comes to famous people, I don't really recognize them. I've got one of those. Both. Yeah, I'm just walking along the road, and my partner will be like, "Oh, look, there's that famous person." My first question is, "Who's that?" I'm pretty bad. I don't really hold heroes in much regard. I did in one of my previous jobs. I did have the opportunity to meet the Dalai Lama. I had a meeting with the Dalai Lama, and that was it was just incredible and quite humbling because we were there with an organization, a human rights organization that I was working for, and there was about 6 or 7 of us in our delegation, including a few interns. And when we walked into the room, there was only about 4 chairs, and so the 2 interns sat down on the floor. The Dalai Lama came in and looked at this, kicked back his chair, and he sat down on the floor so that he was eye to eye with the interns. And so then Brilliant. Myself and my boss were kind of there, like looking down at the Dalai Lama, and I just thought that it was so you know, actions, not words. It was humbling. It was human. It was a lesson for us, probably. There was lots of things going on in that moment. He wasn't trying to kind of make a point, but it was powerful at the same time. He did slap me on the back afterwards. I made a joke, don't remember what the joke was, and he slapped me on the back. I thought, I don't like to slap people on the back.
Was that a playful slap, or has it telling you off?
Playful slap. Yeah, it wasn't because I had sat on the chair.
and just following on from that, what's the most important life lesson that you've learned?
I think that when I was growing up, with being a girl that was interested in football, I kind of kept it from my friends. It's so strange, and I know that for a lot of boys they would understand this, but I remember kind of like not telling anyone about the fact that the weekend I was playing for this football club, and just kind of almost hiding it. I was really proud of my achievements, but I wouldn't really talk about them because it was football, and I couldn't be bothered with the hassle of, you know, the jeers and the kind of stupid comments. So for me, I think that the perfect learning point comes from Dolly Parton, who said, I love this quote. She said, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." And I just think that's like such a wonderful piece of advice that probably I could have done with hearing when I was 16. You know what? You like football, just go for it. Doesn't matter. And I just, I think constantly trying to find out who you are is probably the most important thing. Because if you are, gosh, even some of these words feel a little bit hashtaggy right now. But if you are your genuine, authentic self, that's when you're going to be happiest, and that's when you're going to get the most out of you. So I think it's funny going full circle from being a 16-year-old that kind of hid the fact that I was playing football to now being the CEO of a football club. It's taken a little while, but yeah, I found out who I am, and I'm doing it on purpose.
Brilliant. Again, you and me both. It's a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time. And then lastly, I just wanted to go back to some of your previous experience, which is fascinating, your social justice work. I just wanted your perspective, Maggie, on where you think we are currently as a society when it comes to driving fairness, driving inclusion. You know, I certainly, we're both working in this space. Yeah. And I'd just be really interested in your assessment of where we are and what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're having a lot more conversations, like genuine conversations now. I think that the casual insults that were thrown around when I was a teenager at school, without people knowing the impact of their words, I hope that is now being challenged. I think there's, on a gender lens, I still find it challenging when I realize that people don't really get it. Like they don't. Just recently, I had a conversation with someone, a really, really great guy, and he, after asking how I got into football, he said this throwaway comment, which was, "Oh yeah, I'm one of the disadvantaged people now because I'm white, middle class, like middle-aged." And I kind of had to say to him, look, in the last 6 months of my interactions with people in business, brands, sponsorship, marketing, media, maybe take out media, 99% of the people that I've spoken to or been pitching to for sponsorship have been white, middle-aged, middle-class men like yourself. So it might feel like the fact that we are now showcasing a little bit more talent from people who are not white and male, it might feel like that's huge, but really we're still only in very small percentages. So I think there's still need for a conversation, even that just feels trite. There has to be a willingness on all parts to truly understand why there might be targets being set, or why some people want quotas, or why there are these programs in place. And for me, the most important thing is for people to challenge their friends and their family members and just call them out a little bit, because I think what often happens is that there's a campaign, or someone like me, I will make a speech or I'll do a talk. It's miles harder to say to your own brother, hey, cut it out, that's sexist, or leave it out, or like tell your uncle that actually that's a racist opinion or a racist viewpoint. Those conversations are much more difficult than giving a talk or a speech. And that's where those conversations have to be had. They have to be had in the pub when someone makes a stupid comment. They have to be had immediately, because that's how we'll create that cultural change. So I'm kind of optimistic because we're having some of those conversations, but there's still so much to be done, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done, because I think that people feel like things are being imposed upon them and they don't understand the backgrounds to it. They haven't genuinely engaged with the issues.
Brilliant. That's again fascinating. I could go on all day. Actually, I'm really hoping we get a chance to work together and I can get the full extent of your views and perspectives, because I do find it fascinating. But for this session, thanks very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and fascinating having a conversation with you.